I was out here alone. I called the police trying to get help. I mean, I walked to somebody's house that didn't even know me, and he was scared himself, but he let me use his phone. The only thing I had with me was a small bag of clothes, and that was it. I didn't have an ID or anything on me.
Some of them are coming in with with barely the clothes on their back. You know, they might have just a couple outfits. They don't have proper clothing. They don't have anything to set up a house with. If they did get housing, they have nothing. They have no money. They have no income.
They're in need of identity assistance. They're in need of mental health counseling. They're in need of clothing. They're in need of food. They're in need of life skill training. Perhaps many times they're in need of communication abilities with their families from wherever they may have come from.
They need to rebuild their entire lives in many ways. It's not simply about therapy to talk about what happened. It's finding them housing, finding them some source of income, rebuilding an entire social network for them to be a part of.
When I first came to Albuquerque and called the police, at that moment I was really scared and frightened. I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought the guy was going to come home and see that I was trying to call the police. But they got there just in time, and they got me out of there and brought me straight to Santa Fe that same day. And that same day, that's when I met my caseworker and did all my paperwork. And that's when they just set me up with my therapist and set me up with my apartment.
Human trafficking is the exploitation of a person either through commercial sex or labor. Sometimes victims may be from overseas, from another country, or they may be our own citizens that are victimized here and exploited for labor or commercial sex. No movement is required. Across national borders is not required. Transportation isn't required. What we're looking for is exploitation taking place rather than movement. What we're seeing around the country and in New Mexico are most of these victims. Labor trafficking victims are foreign nationals. Labor trafficking victims can include persons working in the construction field, migrant farm workers, hotel lodging industry, restaurants. Any of these areas we might encounter labor trafficking victims, or domestic servitude. Domestic servitude can include nannies, housekeepers, anybody working in the home.
The people that are trafficked aren't necessarily picked up in their home country and brought against their will. They're offered a job. Hey, I've got a great idea for you. You can be a maid, you can be a nanny, you can make all this money and send home. Once they get here, then they're put into the slavery, as it were, with human trafficking. And as such, that person has their passport. You owe me $5,000 for bringing you here. You owe me for your food. You owe me for your shelter. It's a debt they can never get out of.
Sex trafficking, we have in there kind of a subset. We have the minors and we have the adults.
Very often there's a bond between the victim and the person who is using them, trafficking them, a term often used as pimping them, to use them for their body in the sex trafficking area. Somehow there's a bond there. Also, there can be fear.
Just because a victim loves the pimp or is in love with them does not indicate this person is there willingly. A lot of times these pimps use this type of psychological coercion to keep a woman in the situation, sometimes maybe through drugs, beatings, similar to the domestic violence cycle we're familiar with. Many times these women are held through force, fraud, or coercion and don't feel that they are able to leave for many reasons.
When I first got out here to Albuquerque, I had never been to the West at all. I had no idea where I was.
Many times victims are brought into New Mexico or into any other country or any other state not knowing where they are. This is a ploy used by traffickers to inhibit victims from going forward to finding resources in their community.
Oftentimes it's the very simple things, like seeing people in the exact same clothes over and over again. They may not have ID, they may not know how to use a bank card, they may not ever have money with them. Foreign nationals, in my experience, they're going to be more the group situations as opposed to the individual situations. If it's a sex trafficking sort of situation with U.S. citizens, there may not be as big a group there are more individuals, one and twos,